Welcome to episode 42 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hey, welcome to the Air Hug Community. I am Judy Arizosa, your host, and I created the Air Hug Community to bring you stories from guests and myself that ultimately help improve the lives of others and boomerang back to improve your life. So we cover all sorts of topics like relationships and personal development, how you see the world, and just behaviors that actually affect yourself and others. So strap in, sit down, welcome, and thank you so much for joining in. Hello, everybody. So listen, today we have a guest that I'm so excited to have on. This person I was really thinking of right at the beginning when I created this podcast, that I knew she would be an awesome guest. And so I'm delighted to have her on today. And it's very interesting because she came from a self-proclaimed, very shy childhood. And here she is now as the face of bladder issues for women, which is frankly a very embarrassing topic. And this shy child has grown into a woman who advocates and actually educates us on all issues of bladder. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Lisa King.
Hi, Judy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on today. Yes, I'm a pharmacist, and this month actually marks 33 years as a pharmacist. So I can't believe I'm still doing this. But yes, my specialty is bladder health, and it is definitely something that's not talked about at all. There's so much stigma and embarrassment around it. I fell into talking about this because I have a condition called interstitial cystitis, which is painful bladder syndrome, much more painful than the name even describes. But I was diagnosed with that about 27 years ago. And several years ago, I wrote a book with my sister called Tiny Life Changes. And I was going on to podcasts about that. And somehow it came up that I had interstitial cystitis on one of the podcasts. And I thought, oh my gosh, why are we talking about this? It's in the past. It's so embarrassing. But from sharing there, I started having people ask me questions about it. And I just realized this was something that definitely affects so many women, whether it be painful bladder syndrome or overactive bladder or recurrent urinary tract infections. And no one's really talking about it. And it's something that needs to be talked about because there are solutions, there is hope. And that's what I hope to share with others.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because I can still, embarrassing moment here. I can still remember the first moment when I had a leaky bladder and I'm like, oh my God. We had 3 kids. My youngest kid was a baby. I know I can't even believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to do it. And we were playing football in the yard with nieces and nephews and cousins. And I'm like running and I'm like, oh, what just happened? And honestly, I drink a lot of water and it's been an issue ever since. So I'm fascinated, especially with exercise and women and talking about it. So
yes, exactly. And it's interesting that you say it happened when you were younger, but I've now seeing even a lot of new moms sharing about this. But interestingly enough, one study that I shared about, almost 75% of women in midlife, women ages 40 to 64, will have one bladder leakage episode at least once a month. So that's 75% of women, but no one's talking about it. No one's sharing about this. So It's something that's very common, but it's often not talked about.
Yeah. So beyond Kegels, or maybe we should start there, or maybe we should start wherever you want with what can we do about this?
Well, that's what I always like to share, that there is hope. The first step in controlling any bladder issue is diet and pelvic focused exercises. So diet really does play a huge role. And I do have a free ebook, Say Goodbye to Bladder Pain in 5 Easy Steps. That's on my website. Yeah, that's on my website, ditchbladderpain.com. And it's, I know it says bladder pain, but it's also for women who have overactive bladder. But there are all the foods listed there and more. But the basic foods to avoid are spicy foods, citric foods like oranges, tomatoes, that type of thing, caffeine, coffee, sugary foods and sugary drinks, alcohol. Those are the top offenders. So really start by looking at what you're eating. And I often share that in the morning, especially, someone may have a glass of orange juice and maybe a donut or something like that. So right away, you're having that citric juice that's irritating to the bladder, and then the sugary food that's irritating to the bladder. And so you're setting your day off not really on a great foot. And then if you throw a cup of coffee in there, and caffeine, that goes even further. So that's the first step. Secondly, the pelvic focused exercises, such as the Kegel exercises, are really important. So Kegels are imagining holding in an imaginary stream of urine. And if you really want to learn how to do them properly, you can go see a pelvic floor physical therapist. Your doctor can recommend you to one. And I have had that done in the past, just because when I was first diagnosed, there was no such thing as pelvic floor physical therapy, really. Yeah. And so I heard so many women talking about it. I thought, I want to experience this myself. And they put a little, I guess, a feedback device on your back. And it shows the strength of your Kegels. And I'm telling you, I was not doing them strong enough. And I, even after going through pelvic floor physical therapy, I'm still probably not holding in that stream, hard enough, but they'll teach you how to do it properly. And then some women have a very tight pelvic floor. So you don't want to be too tight if that's going to irritate your bladder even more. So I highly suggest seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist as a great way to properly learn how to do Kegel exercises.
That is so fascinating. And by the way, I will put a reference to your guide and your book in the show notes. But
okay, great.
I had no idea that we could not be doing our Kegels well enough or hard enough. But
yeah, they showed me how to do them differently. They would have me do them, slow, and then a series of fast. As I said, I know I probably need a refresher course, but it's something that we can definitely do, while we're watching TV or at a light. That, sometimes people will say, do it every time you're at a stoplight, or do it every time there's a commercial. And that way you're really getting that pelvic floor strength. But there is so much more, as we had, you had touched upon. Many studies show that a lot of women who have a weak pelvic floor also are lacking in vitamin D. So vitamin D is just so important for so many things, including immunity. So, you can incorporate vitamin D into your daily routine. Also getting out in the sun, getting a little bit of sunshine will help with vitamin D levels. And then also collagen. So, as we get older, we're lacking collagen, our skin starts drooping a little bit, and that also affects the bladder and the pelvic floor. So increasing collagen is really important as well.
Wow. I did not know either of those. All right. I did just learn the vitamin D because you posted it on Instagram recently. I have a quick vitamin D question and then a collagen question. The vitamin D question for our pharmacist, tongue-tied here. My question is, it's a fat soluble vitamin, correct?
Yes.
And so can we take too much of it, or is it easy to overdo it? Or if you're diagnosed with low vitamin D, the one I have is 5,000 units.
Well, in the past, when I first became a pharmacist, a lot of people, the fat soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. So a lot of people were saying you don't want to get too much vitamin D because you can have flu-like symptoms, that type of thing. As time has progressed, they're finding that most people are lacking in vitamin D. So you can definitely get your blood level tested by a medical practitioner, including your doctor. But a lot of people are still lacking. I live in Arizona, and even in Arizona, where there's sunshine all the time, we still would dispense so much prescription vitamin D. Wow. So that's even stronger. So, but yes, definitely you can get too much, but nowadays they're finding that most people don't have enough. So really the best way to know is to have your levels tested.
Okay. Interesting. So I brought that up because I did just have my levels tested. And of course I live in the Northeast where the sun rarely shines, especially in the winter. And I was surprised at how low my levels were. So, but
Mhm.
I may go back. So let's say you want to go for a retest after you've been on it for a while. Like what period of time after consistent supplementing do you suggest getting another test?
Well, I would wait at least several months
Okay.
just to make sure the levels are up high enough. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I
Yeah.
would do.
Maybe
Mhm.
I'll wait till next winter and just keep it up. Okay.
Mhm.
The collagen question. So does it matter how it's consumed? I see pills, I see powders. Does it matter if you're consuming it with food?
No, collagen, honestly, and there's a lot of foods that have collagen in them. Bone broth is so popular now, but
Yeah.
one of the easiest things to do is just to incorporate a little collagen into your smoothie or, into your tea or something like that in the morning. And I know that some people don't really like some of the collagens because they're most often from cows, but
Hmm.
there are marine collagens that you can get as well.
I was just going to ask that because
Mhm.
I know that was recommended to me. Like, look at the different ones. Is one better than the other, or is it just personal preference?
Honestly, I think honestly the same thing with any supplement. There's different grades and varieties. I know some people are saying there's liquid supplements now of collagen that go into your body quicker, but of course, if you're eating that healthy diet, with the bone broth and I just posted about this too, and I'm thinking off the top of my head of what has collagen in it, but like those healthy proteins like chicken and fish,
Hmm.
that type of thing. Natural collagen, of course, is always really a great way to go.
Hmm. So very interesting. Collagen and vitamin D. Who'd have thought? It made me very sad to hear about coffee. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I haven't had coffee in years. And the funny thing is, up until about a year ago, I worked retail pharmacy. So I was working 12-hour shifts and everybody else would be so tired. And I would just be like going. And they're like, Lisa, you're the only one not drinking coffee here. How come you have so much energy? But, it's all about, hydration, as you said. But I know definitely there are some days that I'm thinking, I wish I could have a cup of coffee.
Yeah. How about like an organic decaf? No?
Well, the funny thing about coffee is that it is acidic. So for women, some women who have an overactive bladder, you may be able to do decaf. There are low acid coffees. And
Hmm.
I actually just bought a tea by Ticino that is a dandelion tea that tasted exactly like coffee. I tried it once or twice just for something fun. But for women who
Ah.
have a painful bladder, such as I do,
Hmm.
even decaffeinated coffee is something that should be avoided because coffee can be very acidic.
Okay. Very interesting. So, is it a dandelion root tea?
Yeah, yeah, and they have so many different. I just happen to go with the dandelion root. But the funny thing about it is, it's a bit of a diuretic, so it's making me urinate more frequently anyway.
Anyways, yes.
Yes, but
Yeah.
they have all different varieties, and that's just one brand. I know there's many different brands of teas that kind of taste like coffee that are made out of different herbs. So it's really kind of just a fun thing to try.
Yeah. Well, mostly, although I do love that smell of coffee in the morning, but
Mhm.
people in the Northeast, like, I don't know, like people that I know, like, we're so cold all the time that coffee is like, oh, I think I'll have something
Yes.
warm.
Yeah, I'm originally from New York, and I think it's just something that people do there. My mom and my aunt will always be saying, "Oh, let's have a cup of coffee," even like midday or in the evening. It's just, I think, something that people do here. We have our coffee iced because it's so hot.
Oh, goodness. What's the use? Oh, well.
Exactly.
Oh, how funny. Wow. So I did also want to ask you because we do have this in common. And you've talked about it a little bit online. I asked you if I could ask that you talked about your sister going through cancer.
Yes, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 35 when her youngest was just 11 months old. And she's fine now. Her youngest is now about to graduate from high school and is 18. But at that time, she started a charity that helps moms undergoing cancer treatment. So it's been a very big part of our lives.
Oh,
And my mom is a two-time breast cancer survivor. So definitely I have that awareness all the time. What can I do to help prevent breast cancer or any really disease state? I'm all about disease prevention.
hmm. Interesting. So that's I love that she created a charity about that.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
missed that. That's pretty.
It's called the Happily Ever After League. They support moms undergoing cancer treatment with financial grants. So when she was first diagnosed, she had just so much help from friends and family. And she just knew that there were probably so many other moms in the same exact circumstance that she was that didn't have that support that she needed. So they really have a wonderful community. It's been a little different with the pandemic, but they do have a healing house where moms can go once a month and go to a food pantry and just different support groups and things like that. So it's really been wonderful that she's been able to turn a negative situation in her life into such a big positive.
That is really amazing that she actually took on that mindset.
Yeah. And
Yes.
that's one of the basis of our book, Tiny Life Changes. So we both went through a very difficult time at the same time. And that's how the book came about. So Lauren was going through her cancer treatment right about when I was going through the downturn of 2008 and just financially had to start again. The funny thing about it is I had lived with chronic illness for so long with the interstitial cystitis, but it didn't even occur to me that that was something that I should put in the book at the time. But I think it's just because when you have a chronic illness and then you finally start feeling better, you just kind of want to put it in the past.
Yeah. Why dig it up? Right. You had
Exactly.
learned how to manage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really about mindset and just moving forward, and that's what we share in the book,
Yeah.
even with Lauren, because the tagline of the book is to take things one step and one day at a time. And she said when she was going through her cancer recovery, sometimes she couldn't even take it one day at a time. Sometimes it was just one moment at a time, 1 hour at a time. You know, can I get through this hour? Can I get through when my husband gets home tonight? And that type of thing. So it's really just about shifting your mindset to not have thoughts that can control you and somewhat take over, and just keep moving forward one step and one day at a time.
Wow. Okay. So I think that's pretty amazing that I use the word amazing a lot. Maybe I'm easily
Mhm.
impressed. But the fact that the two of you got together and wrote a book about this, like
Yeah.
how did that come about? And thank you so much for doing that. I think I actually have the book. I have not read it yet, but I'm going to put it at the
Oh,
top of my
yeah. I was
list.
going to say, yeah, just we have, you can get it through Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Well, we both love pretty journals. We're journal girls. So we wanted to just have something where people could just journal and share, their day to day and just keep moving forward. Well, we were able to have a publisher help us with this. And he was like, well, it has to be more of a book form. So it really is very easy read. And that's one thing about it. The book is called Tiny Life Changes. So it's just very simple reminders. And it's really good for anyone in any part of a self-development journey. So whether you're just starting out or some people may be further along in their journey, they're just really simple reminders. One of the biggest things we hear about it all the time is people say, I read it in one day. And so for somebody who's looking for more, that may be just too simple. But for others, they're like, oh, wow, this isn't daunting to me. This isn't too hard to read. I can read this and I can stay positive and move forward with my goals. And so I like to share about that type of thing too. My account, the Fulfilled Pharmacist on Instagram and Facebook, I share a lot about not necessarily the book, but just staying upbeat no matter what your circumstances.
Yeah. And it's funny. The way I look at it is we're always on a personal development journey, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, definitely.
So it, I don't know. It's how are we not? Even if we don't acknowledge it or look at it that way, but then a lot of times we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like work with a lot of midlife women and all the changes that go along with that. And the thing that we talk about most is mindset. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, I love what you do because I mean, even for myself, I went through menopause almost 8 years ago because I had a hysterectomy. And my doctor said at the time, you may experience some weight gain. And I was thinking, oh, not me. I am really good at what I eat and that type of thing. And sure enough, here's the weight gain. And it's so funny because I actually just learned, I'm also studying herbalism, that one of the reasons, and you probably know this, is that there is an amount of estrogen that is good for you that helps with, cardiac health and your brain health. And so when you go through menopause, your body wants to hold on to that fat. or increase the fat because that's where the estrogen is in
Estrogen's
the fat. Yeah.
right.
And so I was like, oh, I never knew that. But I'm like, well, that makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely been a struggle for me. So I love seeing your tips, and I'll take all the tips I can on how to manage my weight in menopause.
It's funny because I actually turned my mindset around because knowing that, okay, our ovaries don't really produce estrogen anymore and our fat cells do. And I'm like, you know what? That little bit of a belly that has a little bit of fat there, that's helping. It's not, it's
Yeah.
not all bad. So,
Yeah. And it's definitely, even after you have your first baby and, your body changes a little bit, it's definitely a change. But I just think if you can feel your best, so even if I'm feeling my best, even having these few extra pounds, I think that's what it's really all about, just living that healthy lifestyle. And so sometimes for me, just knowing that I'm doing whatever I can to prevent that breast cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever it is, and I'm eating right, it can be a little frustrating when you're not losing weight, but for me, and that's part of the name that I chose, the Fulfilled Pharmacist. It's all about not only living a long life, but a long, happy, vibrant, fulfilled life.
yeah, I think at the end of our life, and this is something that kind of comes up a lot sometimes when I'm really competitive, and I'll go into a story and then come back. But a lot of times I've been very competitive. Like I used to play a lot of tennis, but that was for fun, and I was just
Mm-hmm.
an okay tennis player. I wasn't a star or anything, but I would be in these leagues and people would argue over a point. And I'm like, you know what? If you really want a point, you could have it, because at the end of my life, nobody is writing this score on my gravestone. And that became like my tennis mantra. Go out there, have fun, do your best, but it's not, what people are going to remember you for. And I've actually thought about this a lot, is moving on. Do I want to be thought about, and I talk to the women about this. Do you want to be remembered as always being on a diet and being miserable? And, it's fine if you want to eat healthy, but if you're miserable about it and you consider it
Mm-hmm.
to be punishment, is that really how you want to go through life and be remembered? Where's the
Yeah.
fulfillment in that?
Absolutely. I love that. I think I'm going to start thinking of that. It's so funny because actually it was about a weekend or so ago. I had watched a show on how to make biscuits. And so I really love these biscuits. And so I said to my husband, you know what? I'm just eating the biscuits. I mean, like you only live once. And so here we are. I'm just going to have them. But yeah, I think it's just all about balance and moderation. And interestingly enough, you say about being competitive. I've never been a sports girl at all. I really don't play a lot of sports, but I'm very competitive as well. And for me, it was with my grades in school, just, having to be, at the top of the class, getting an A, that type of thing. And really, all of my bladder symptoms came right when I got down to pharmacy school. That's when it all started. I
Oh,
wasn't diagnosed right away, because in our community, the interstitial cystitis community, they often say it takes 7 years and 7 doctors, but that's when it all started, because I really feel that my body was just so run down from pushing myself to excel and not sleeping and not really eating properly, that it really just manifested in this illness for me. So that's why it's really just so important to listen to what your body is saying to you. And so even in midlife, if you don't have enough energy because you're not eating enough, or you feel super run down because you're not getting the proper nutrients, it's just so important to listen to what your body's saying so that it doesn't manifest into some sort of disease state.
yeah. That's amazing once again, because the more we talk about it, it's like, ladies, listen to what you have, all the answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have all the answers. Our body gives us so many signs, like you were saying, and it's amazing. And that if we would just stop for a minute and almost put blinders on and just look what's happening. If we do A, then what happens? If we do B, does something else happen? And how do you feel better? Especially with the energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for me recently. I've had a bit of a mindset shift even in the last year. For me, it was always about food as medicine. So I know I can't eat these certain foods because it's not good for my body, but I never really thought of food as fuel. For so many years, I just calorie restricted. I mean, this is going back years and years, always calorie restricted. And now it's like if I'm having that afternoon slump or I feel hungry, I'm like, your body's telling you, you need to eat. You can't just keep restricting.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely listening in that way.
Yeah, same here. And there again, I think for stories that I've heard coming in, people would get to that afternoon slump and want to calorie restrict. So what would they have? Coffee,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And, it's probably not making things any better. Then, of course, maybe there's insomnia from the caffeine, and over again, it gets into that bad cycle. So,
Yeah. Definitely have to listen to our bodies.
yeah. So it's funny. I think we don't trust ourselves as women. A lot of times we want outside experts to tell us,
Yeah.
here's a new diet, here's this, here's that. Where I think all along it's always been the basics. We get a nice variety of fresh food, including vegetables and a good amount of protein and blah, 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 and we feel better.
Yeah. And self-care. I think just as women in general, we don't think of ourselves first. And so really I started doing this mindful meditation. I call it a meditation, but it was really almost like just taking time every day to just visualize my bladder getting healthier. I would do this right before I picked my kids up from school. And I always say that was the icing on the cake for me personally, to have my bladder finally get into a state of healing where I could start moving forward and living my life. And another thing, just as an aside, as we're talking about food, the interstitial cystitis diet is extremely strict. So it's the foods that I mentioned earlier, plus much more. And so I really think that so many people ask me, well, can you eat whatever you want now? Can you eat whatever you want now? And I'm thinking, well, no, I don't necessarily can eat whatever I want, but I really can eat whatever I want, because some of the foods that I avoid, it's because I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to be able to travel with my husband or go to my son's wedding and not worry about my bladder. So giving up a few foods to gain that freedom from bladder issues is really, not that big of a deal to me.
Yeah, it's a whole mindset shift. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it in terms of your joy, right? Your daily
Right.
joy, then it is what you want,
Exactly. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
can eat whatever I want.
And there's probably a lot more than, I'm just guessing, that what you can eat versus what you can't, but you don't have to focus on the can't, right?
Right. Well, that's the funny thing. And I think a lot of times when you go on any sort of restrictive diet, you're kind of concentrating on what you can't eat. And I'm Italian. I know your last name is Italian. I don't know if you're of Italian heritage also, but I mean, so much of what I was originally eating was foods that I couldn't eat, so much tomato sauce
Tomatoes.
and some spicy sausage and you name it. So, really just changing was so important. But initially, and this happens with a lot of women who first are diagnosed with bladder issues, they'll think, oh, well, if I'm not able to eat this, then I just won't really eat much at all. So I first started just eating only bread and water, which there's no nutrient value there. And so I was just so tired all the time.
Seriously,
I
you
know
were eating bread and water?
yeah, yeah. I mean, seriously. And I know I've talked to so many women who just say, oh, I'll only have rice and water, because you're
Mhm.
just so afraid to eat. And which leads us to another thing I know that we had touched upon and we wanted to talk about was gut health. So
Mhm.
when you're having these foods, there's no nutrition. So, another thing is just gut health is just so important for all bladder issues, because several things, constipation can really exacerbate overactive bladder or painful bladder, because you have this heavy bowel just sitting on top of your bladder. So it's just so important to stay regular and have those fiber filled foods.
Mhm.
Nowadays, interstitial cystitis is thought to possibly be autoimmune. So when you have those
Oh.
inflammatory foods like sugar, dairy, gluten, causing those open gap junctions in the stomach, you're more likely to have autoimmune system symptoms. And
So,
then the
are you
other thing
talking about
too,
leaky gut?
leaky gut. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And then also I know another thing for women in midlife are recurrent urinary tract infections.
Mhm.
And so it seems like it may be your imagination that you're having recurrent UTIs, but it's because of that down shift in hormones. So a lot of women may have vaginal dryness. And so that dry vaginal area creates an environment where good bacteria aren't plentiful. And so the bad bacteria thrive, and that's what causes the UTIs. So again, reducing sugar in the diet, where the bad bacteria can't thrive, and also improving gut health just to boost immunity and fight off those infections,
Yeah.
alongside, maybe using a daily vaginal moisturizer, that type of thing, are really just so important.
Yeah, there's a lot that you just covered right there, from vaginal dryness to gut health. Um, what is your thought? I know my doctor agrees with this, but what is your thought on probiotics?
Oh, I definitely recommend probiotics all the time. Not
Hmm.
only is it good for immunity, but gut health, to boost
Hmm.
a mood. I'm definitely all about
All
probiotics.
on
Sometimes I will say that you may have to experiment with what you're taking, because some of them are not as effective as others.
others. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes some of them may be too much. My system is a little bit sensitive, so sometimes I'll have to cut back on the probiotic a little bit, because then I'm going to the bathroom too often. But
Mhm.
yeah, definitely, I highly recommend. What did your doctor say? I hope it's an agreement.
It is an agreement, and it's very interesting because we talked about like bringing them in slowly, but
Hmm.
then so I'm certified through Precision Nutrition, and
Hmm.
is a wonderful, people can look that up. They're a wonderful organization, and Dr. John Bernardi is the face of, or the founder, but he basically, it's like going to grad school without going to grad school. It took me a year to certify, but their position is to start slowly, but to actually do double the recommended dose. And actually, that was, I only have myself to speak of, but for me, that worked out really well. But like you said, there were a couple brands that were not so friendly, let me just say. They were a little bit
Yeah,
more intense, I guess you could say.
right.
And so there had to be some experimentation. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But no, it's something that I highly recommend.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that's something we overlook a lot. And I think people overlook the sugar gut health relationship with the bad bacteria quite a bit.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I post about sugar reduction a lot. I mean, just even for general overall healthy living, it's just so important, because it's, linked to so many different disease states aside from the bladder health, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, you name it. So what I recommend, and I've often been called out on this, but it's, I think, a really good starting point, is the American Heart Association recommendation of 25 grams a day for women. For me, that's very generous, but it's a good starting point for those who are not really looking at sugar labels.
Hmm.
And it's something that's really surprising. So I went from being a mom who baked every single day for her kids to someone who's very conscious of sugar intake now. And so I keep saying, if I could do it, anybody could do it. But I really just started by looking at labels, because it's so surprising. Even foods that you may think are really super healthy, health foods, such as like protein bars, often have 15, 16 grams of
Yeah.
sugar. Yogurt, 15, 16 grams of sugar. So even if you had a yogurt in the morning and then a protein bar mid morning, you're already over your daily allotment of sugar for the day. And
Yeah.
so, it's just something to just really take a look at. And I think really once you start looking at those labels, your body's going to just naturally start reducing sugar on its own. You're not going to crave that sweetness.
That's a very interesting point. Again, a lot of people that I've talked to have talked about, once you get over that little bit of the first few days, and for some people, a couple of weeks, right, of reducing sugar, after that, it's like, yeah, all right, it's fine.
Yeah, I remember the very first time I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I just ruined my life. It was my husband's birthday, and there's this cake that we have in town here in Scottsdale that's super popular. One of my friends brought it over for my husband's birthday, and I took one bite and it was just too sweet for me. I couldn't even eat it. And I'm thinking, oh, I used to love that cake. But
Wow.
it's just all for health purposes. For me, I just started looking at sugar reduction, even despite the fact that my mom and my sister are both breast cancer survivors, was when my mother-in-law was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It was just such a horrific disease for me to witness, and my husband's family to go through, that I was like, whatever I can do is just so important to reduce, any
Yeah, the
chances of
chances.
cognitive decline. And really, sugar is not a good fuel for your brain to run on.
Right. And you know what? Yeah, we need glucose, but your body can make glucose from lots of other whole foods, right?
Yes, exactly.
So we don't have to consume it in a processed form, which
Yes.
is really interesting. And so, by the way, you talked a few minutes ago about being Italian and from New York. Yes, and yes, although my last name is not Italian, but I am Italian. Oh, well, Italian heritage. But I
Hmm.
think that's pretty interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Well, now with my last name being King, nobody would
Nobody
guess.
knows. Yeah.
But yes, yeah. And so it's funny because I just grew up on Italian food and that type of thing. And so I don't really make a lot of pasta now, but it's funny. A lot of the like the Midwest casseroles, things like that. I never really have had one, I don't think, because that's just not the way I grew up eating.
Yeah. Right. Those tuna noodle casseroles or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet they're delicious though.
Probably anything, creamy and carby is probably delicious. But anyways, I digress.
Mhm.
So is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about managing an overactive or painful bladder?
Really just that there are solutions. So if this is something that you are struggling with, you are not alone. It's something that is embarrassing. Studies show that women don't even talk to their doctors about this for up to 5 years
Mhm,
after having, an overactive bladder or painful
mhm.
bladder. So you're not alone. There are solutions. Start with diet. Diet is the first step in any managing any bladder condition. And even if you have recurrent UTIs, your bladder may be very irritated after these UTIs. And so reducing those foods or removing those foods, even for a little while, is extremely helpful. Pelvic focused workouts, there's so much more that you can do as well. But really just know that you're not alone and that there are solutions.
That's really encouraging, I think. Um, Really, really encouraging. And I'm almost thinking, geez, maybe we should incorporate a little bit of pelvic work in with a little bit of our mobility work pre-workout. Why not?
Yeah, yeah, that would
You
be
know,
great. Even yoga can be very helpful, different yoga poses.
is that right? Oh,
Yeah. Hmm.
to look at that. So this is so interesting. Okay. And then gut health is also
Huge. Gut health
huge.
health is everything. It's really the basis of everything because with the leaky gut, autoimmunity comes into play as women get older. Preventing infections, staying with that boosted mood, boosted immunity, just really just so important. And I think I don't know, maybe it's just some of the people I follow, people I believe really have been thinking more about their immunity just due to the start of the pandemic. So
Yeah,
just improving gut health is just so important even for that as well.
absolutely. Yeah, we're all a little bit more aware,
Hmm.
and
Exactly.
how about, I mean, I'm thinking this is a nationwide thing. I thought it was just a local thing, but the decrease in flu this past year.
Yeah, interesting. It's so funny because my sister and I were just talking about that. As a pharmacist, I worked retail pharmacy, grocery retail actually for years and years. And I would see people just, right in front of the pharmacy counter, really sick, asking me, they had a cough or something, and then just going around the whole store coughing, not covering their mouth. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, really just, I think having those masks on probably helped us not only with reducing flu, but reducing, other, normal cold and flu symptoms as well,
Symptoms.
just because people would be so surprised at, just people just coughing and sneezing and you name it, just without covering their mouth. I witnessed a lot of that.
Yeah. Or
Mhm.
touching their mouth and then, shaking hands or whatever, not thinking, or hugging, because hugging was such a big thing. And I'm like, okay. It used to skeeve me out. Like if I would hug someone and then later on they'd be like sniffling, I'm like, did you want to like let me know?
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're just much more aware now. So I think that's a good thing. I'm hoping that moving forward, even though the pandemic is, slowing down a bit, that I'm thinking that we're just so much more aware of, staying healthy ourselves, that I'm hoping it'll have carry over to, other cold and flu and that type of thing as well.
It would be a wonderful thing. Everyone's quality of life would be so much better with such
Yes,
little
exactly.
things. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. This has been so interesting. So I'm just going to review really quick. We talked about diet, foods that you can avoid, which you can look up in your free guide. We talked about collagen. We talked about vitamin D, gut health, and pelvic floor physical therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh,
All very important.
wow, that's a lot. So, wow. Okay. So if people want to find you on Instagram, you are the Fulfilled Pharmacist.
Yes, the Fulfilled Pharmacist on Instagram and Facebook, much more active on Instagram. But honestly, if anybody wants to send me a message, if they have a question, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. So send her a message on, and I'll put that in the show notes on
Instagram.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this has been super enlightening and encouraging. And what I like most is that is your response to, can you eat whatever you want? And you're like, well, what you want is what makes you feel the best and makes you have the best quality of life day to day. So yes, you do eat whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really holds true for what you do as well. So
It's
if you
true.
want that energy, and
Yeah.
you're working with Judy, then eat whatever you want. But it's going to be stuff that gives you energy and it's good for your body.
Right. It's just actually, and I love that because part of it, and I talked about this in a previous, I was going to wrap up, but I talked about this just a little bit ago about actually finding joy in the journey, not in the
Mhm.
destination. Don't rob yourself of joy and just consider something awful because it's different. You weren't that happy before, whether you had pain or sluggishness or whatever, right? So
Exactly.
embracing it as a quality of life improver, how can you not find it joyful?
Absolutely.
Right? Or fulfilling. Exactly. So,
Yes.
Lisa, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up here. You're going to stay on for a minute, folks. This has been awesome. You can check out the show notes, and we'll be back next time. Wow, I think that was super, super informative, and I'm so thankful that Lisa hopped on and did this little talk with us. Really quick, let's talk about those 5 things that are totally within our control to improve our own bladder health. These 5 strategies include managing your diet to avoid irritating foods, supplementing with collagen and also with vitamin D, making sure that your gut health is in tip-top shape, and consulting a pelvic floor physical therapist should that be indicated. So thank you very much for listening today. As always, I appreciate you letting me put topics in your ear. And remember to check back every single Tuesday here on the Air Hug Community Podcast so that you can improve your life and the lives of others.